Morning has a way of arriving gently, yet insistently, when the first light brushes the horizon. Stretching its golden fingers across the sky, it whispers a quiet reminder. Life has begun again. Before the world stirs with its noise, before obligations and deadlines begin their relentless drum, there exists a sacred pause space where breath and awareness meet, where the soul can remember its place in the grand tapestry of existence. To awaken in this moment is to recognize something profoundly simple, yet profoundly powerful. You are alive. Your lungs have drawn in air, your heart beats in rhythm without permission, and your mind stirs with possibility. This alone is a miracle. It is not contingent on wealth, on recognition, on the approval of others, or on circumstances aligning perfectly. Life itself is a gift, given anew each day, and the first act of spiritual wisdom is to acknowledge it. Jesus himself modeled this sacred rhythm. He did not begin his mornings in complaint, lamenting what had yet to come, or fretting over what might fail. Instead, he began in communion with the Father, with his purpose, and with a heart tuned to gratitude. His practice was not ritualistic in a lifeless sense, but alive with recognition. The day is a canvas, and every moment of breath, every encounter, every challenge, is a stroke on it. Before meeting crowds or facing scarcity, he paused, offered thanks, and set his gaze on what was within reach rather than what was absent. In this way, gratitude became his anchor. The first step in transforming ordinary circumstances into extraordinary opportunities. Gratitude, when embraced in the morning, does something miraculous to perspective. It shifts the lens through which the day is seen. Scarcity, the sense of not enough, loses its grip. Worry no longer dictates the narrative. Anxiety does not set the pace. Instead, eyes attuned to gratitude begin to notice the hidden treasures within the ordinary. The soft warmth of sunlight on skin, the steady rhythm of the heart, the unseen protection that has carried you through trials unnoticed. Even the small, seemingly insignificant aspects of life, a single act of kindness, a word of encouragement, the laughter of a child, become sources of spiritual abundance. What once felt insufficient now becomes sacred. This awareness invites the soul to participate in the sacred principle that Jesus exemplified. Small offerings can carry infinite potential. The faith you hold, even if hesitant, the hope that flickers, even if tired, the dream still unfolding, even if incomplete. Lift them in thanks, and watch how they take on a new dimension. Gratitude transforms limitation into possibility, weakness into strength, and uncertainty into expectation. The act of offering thanks is itself an act of faith. It says, I may not see the outcome, but I trust the one who holds it. In these quiet morning moments, the discipline of gratitude is not passive. It is a declaration, a spiritual posture, a choice to anchor the day in awareness of God's presence, rather than the world's demands. It is the recognition that life is a series of gifts waiting to be named, acknowledged, and embraced. When you begin your morning in gratitude, you prepare the soil of your heart for the miracles of the day. Your spirit stretches, your mind opens, and your soul breathes freely. And in that space, even the smallest offerings, your imperfect faith, your tentative hope, your unfinished dreams, become vessels of blessing, capable of receiving and multiplying God's grace. So today, beloved soul, rise not in haste, not in panic, but in thanksgiving. Let the first moments of your morning be an act of conscious acknowledgement. You are alive, you are seen, you are held, and you are enough. Lift what you have in gratitude, and watch how the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. There is a sacred rhythm in life that many overlook. The power of giving thanks before the outcome is visible. Too often, we wait until success arrives, until problems are solved, until blessings are tangible, to offer our gratitude. But this is not the way of faith. Jesus showed us a higher path, a way of living where thanksgiving is not contingent upon circumstances. Before multiplying the 5 loaves and 2 fish, before the crowd was fed, before abundance appeared in human sight, Jesus lifted what little there was and gave thanks. That act of gratitude was not passive. It was deliberate, active, and full of faith. It was a declaration that God's power was greater than the limitations of the moment, that divine provision could transform insufficiency into plenty, and that a thankful heart sets the stage for miracles. Gratitude before the miracle is a spiritual posture. It shifts the soul from reacting to the world's demands to aligning with God's character. When we thank God before results appear, we are choosing to trust the one whose wisdom and timing surpass our understanding. We are acknowledging that our efforts, though valuable, are not the final determinant of what unfolds. In this posture, the heart is softened, hope is strengthened, the soul becomes a vessel ready to receive. The hands may hold little, the circumstances may feel limiting, yet gratitude positions us for the multiplication that only God can bring. This principle goes far beyond the story of the loaves and fish. It is a divine law that operates in every area of life. Consider the ways we cling to what we perceive as insufficient: small talents, limited resources, fragile faith, uncertain plans. We measure ourselves against the crowd, compare our offerings to what we wish we had, and doubt whether what we bring is enough. But gratitude changes that equation. When we offer thanks for what is present, even if it seems small, we acknowledge God as the source rather than our own effort. We declare that what we hold is sufficient for Him to begin a work, even if it is not enough to finish it by human standards. Thanking God early is also an act of spiritual courage. It requires belief in the unseen, a willingness to trust before proof, a commitment to praise in the waiting. It says, "I will lift my eyes and my heart, not because I see the outcome, but because I know the provider." This kind of faith is fierce, persistent, and transformative. It shifts the focus from what is missing to what is present, from anxiety to expectancy, from limitation to possibility. In that space, the miraculous begins to take form, not because we control it, but because gratitude invites God to intervene. Moreover, gratitude before the miracle reshapes our inner landscape. It quiets the voice of fear and doubt, which thrive on scarcity and uncertainty. It trains the heart to see God's faithfulness even in the waiting. It softens pride, dismantles entitlement, and prepares the soul to steward whatever blessing arrives with humility and wisdom. In essence, gratitude is not just a response to abundance. It is the catalyst for it. It opens doors that human effort alone cannot reach and invites multiplication in ways that logic cannot predict. Jesus' example reminds us that the timing of thanksgiving matters. Praise offered before the blessing is a declaration of trust. It is a spiritual alignment with the rhythm of heaven. It demonstrates that our faith is not transactional, that our worship is not dependent on outcomes, and that our hearts are oriented toward God rather than circumstance. When we practice this principle, we participate in the divine process of transformation. What seems insufficient in our hands becomes more than enough in God's care. What begins with thanks grows into abundance, and what starts with a small offering can ripple into a miracle beyond measure. So today, let your heart lift before the harvest. Give thanks for the seeds, for the little you have, for the hope still trembling in your soul. Lift your hands, even if empty, and watch how gratitude shifts the landscape of your life. Faithful thanks opens doors that human effort cannot reach. Gratitude invites multiplication, and in the quiet power of your thanksgiving, heaven leans in to do what only God can do. There is a sacred principle in the life of faith. Miracles begin with what is available, not what seems sufficient by human standards. Jesus demonstrated this truth vividly when he worked with 5 loaves and 2 fish. To the eyes of those around him, it was far too little for the crowd that waited, hungry and expectant. Yet Jesus did not wait for abundance, nor did he demand perfection. What mattered was the willingness to bring what was in his hands and place it into God's care. This act of surrender, this offering of the small and seemingly insufficient, became the very instrument of divine multiplication. What begins in humility becomes the vessel for God's power. Offering what we have requires more than physical giving. It is a spiritual posture, a declaration of trust. It demands humility, acknowledging that we are limited and that God is unlimited. It calls for obedience, choosing to act even when we do not fully understand the outcome. It requires willingness, allowing God to take what is small, fragile, or incomplete and transform it for purposes beyond our imagination. Many hesitate because they believe they must first achieve perfection, amass more resources, or gain complete understanding before they contribute. Jesus showed a different path. Readiness is not about having enough. It is about being available. Your willingness, surrendered heart, and honest offering are enough for God to begin the work. This principle extends far beyond material provisions. It encompasses time, attention, energy, patience, and even forgiveness. You may feel you have too little to make a difference, but God can multiply what seems small. A kind word spoken at the right moment can ripple into healing. A patient act in the face of frustration can open doors to peace. Offering your presence, even when weary, can provide comfort where it is most needed. Each act of surrender is a seed planted, and God is the master cultivator, who ensures it grows beyond measure. Offering what we have also frees us from the tyranny of comparison. It is easy to look at others and measure our contributions against their apparent abundance. We see their resources, their influence, their successes, and we feel inadequate. Yet gratitude and surrender shift our perspective. When we release our offerings without comparing them to another's, We embrace a freedom that allows God's multiplication to flourish. The focus is no longer on our insufficiency, but on God's sufficiency. Fear and control lose their grip. Anxiety over not enough dissolves because we trust the one who multiplies. There is a profound peace in surrender. When you place what you have in God's hands, you are relieved of the burden of trying to manufacture outcomes on your own. You acknowledge that your role is important but not ultimate. Your job is not to create the miracle, it is to offer what is present, faithfully and honestly. God's work completes what human effort cannot. This is the heart of partnership with heaven. You bring what you can, and God brings what only He can. Jesus' act with the loaves and fish reveals another truth. The small, surrendered heart often carries more power than the largest hoarded resources. The miracle did not begin with an abundance of food, it began with faith, willingness, and obedience. What was multiplied was not just physical provision but spiritual principle. God honors surrender. He transforms scarcity into plenty. He blesses the humble, obedient, and willing. And the multiplication that follows often exceeds human imagination, reaching far beyond what the giver could have planned or expected. So today, lift what you have. It may feel too little, too incomplete, or too fragile, but place it in God's hands anyway. Offer your time, your talents, your patience, and your small acts of faith. Trust Him to complete what your hands alone cannot. Release the need to control the outcome. Stop comparing your offering to others. And watch as God multiplies what you freely give. Availability and surrender are the keys. The small, surrendered heart becomes a conduit for divine power. And in God's economy, there is no offering too small to become a miracle. Fear and anxiety are relentless teachers, quietly shaping the soul when left unchecked. They thrive in the absence of awareness, growing louder when attention focuses on scarcity, uncertainty, or what might go wrong. The human heart has a natural tendency to rehearse losses, anticipate failure, and magnify limitations. Yet there exists a spiritual antidote, a discipline that redirects the mind, steadies the heart, and reclaims authority over worry. Gratitude. Thanksgiving is more than a polite acknowledgement, it is a declaration of faith, a conscious act that reshapes perception and restores peace. Gratitude shifts the focus from problems to God's presence. When fear whispers, "You cannot endure this," gratitude responds, "God is already with me." When anxiety murmurs, "You will not have enough," thanksgiving answers, "I have enough for today because God provides." This subtle but profound redirection interrupts the cycle of panic and refocuses the soul on divine sufficiency rather than human limitation. By naming even small blessings, the breath in your lungs, the rhythm of your heart, the unnoticed protections of yesterday, you create a spiritual posture that refuses to let fear dictate the terms of your day. Jesus exemplified this practice consistently. He faced crowds that were hungry, challenges that seemed insurmountable, and opposition that pressed relentlessly. Yet His response was not frantic or reactive. He lifted thanks, grounded in faith, and approached every situation with calm clarity. Gratitude guided His actions, steadied His decisions, and multiplied the effectiveness of His ministry. When thanksgiving leads, the soul does not simply survive, it thrives. It navigates challenges with discernment, moves with purpose rather than panic, and responds to difficulty with strength rather than despair. The power of gratitude is not theoretical, it is transformative. Fear loses authority when the heart is anchored in thanksgiving. Anxiety begins to dissolve when the mind practices the discipline of noticing God's presence. Scarcity thinking diminishes when attention turns to what is already abundant: love, breath, opportunity, and purpose. Gratitude acts like a lens, revealing the fullness of life even amid limitation. It does not erase problems, but it reorders priorities. The pressing challenges of the day remain, yet they take their rightful place beneath the larger truth. God is faithful, present, and able to provide beyond measure. Moreover, gratitude is a training ground for resilience. It is a discipline that strengthens the soul over time. Each act of thanks is a conscious choice to refuse fear's narrative, a decision to affirm trust before the evidence appears. When practiced regularly, it rewires the mind to notice the good in each situation, to find lessons hidden in difficulties, and to recognize the ordinary as sacred. In doing so, gratitude creates an inner sanctuary where peace can reside regardless of external circumstances. The storms of life may rage, but the spirit anchored in thanksgiving remains unshaken. Gratitude also restores dignity and perspective. When fear and anxiety dominate, the soul feels small, powerless, and inadequate. But when thanksgiving becomes the leading voice, the heart remembers its true position: beloved, held and guided by a higher hand. This recognition empowers the believer to act with confidence, to love with intention, and to step forward with courage. It transforms not only perception but also behavior. Choices become wiser, patience stretches further, and interactions with others are infused with compassion rather than tension. So today, let gratitude be your first response, not your last. Begin by naming the blessings, often overlooked: the simple breath, the gift of sight, the lessons learned, the protection unseen. Allow thanksgiving to reshape your inner world. Let it silence fear, demote anxiety, and dissolve scarcity thinking. Gratitude is not merely a feeling, it is a spiritual discipline, a deliberate act that cultivates peace, resilience, and strength. When thanksgiving leads, the heart rests, the mind clarifies, and the soul becomes an instrument through which God's presence flows. Peace is not found in circumstances but in the posture of gratitude, and in that peace, life finds its truest rhythm. The way a day begins often sets the tone for everything that follows. Morning is more than the turning of the clock. It is a doorway into possibility, a soft pause before the world demands your strength, your patience, and your focus. To start the day with gratitude is to step through that doorway intentionally, aligning your spirit with God's purpose before the noise of life can shape your heart. When thanksgiving becomes the first act of the morning, it establishes a foundation for daily victory. Peace anchored not in circumstance but in the assurance of God's presence. Gratitude precedes action. Before obedience becomes routine, before patience is tested, before moral victories are won in moments of temptation or difficulty, thanksgiving aligns the heart. Jesus demonstrated this rhythm consistently. He began the day in prayer and communion, lifting thanks before engaging with crowds, challenges, or opposition. Identity and trust came before action. Relationship with the Father came before results. This order matters because the posture of the heart dictates the effectiveness of every choice. When we anchor our mornings in gratitude, we begin in alignment with God rather than reacting to the pressure of the day. Daily thanksgiving transforms routine into ritual. Simple acts, waking, breathing, preparing for the day, become sacred opportunities to connect with the divine. The ordinary is elevated into the extraordinary, not by grandeur but by awareness. Each morning becomes a practice field for the soul, a place to cultivate patience, sharpen discernment, and strengthen spiritual resilience. Gratitude trains the heart to recognize that victory is not merely in outcomes but in alignment with purpose. When the day unfolds, decisions are shaped by perspective rather than panic. Steps are ordered by wisdom rather than urgency. Words flow from grace rather than haste. Jesus' rhythm also teaches us that the measure of success is not in external circumstances but in the posture of the heart. He did not wait for perfect conditions, large crowds, or immediate affirmation. Instead, he began with gratitude, trusting that God's provision, guidance, and wisdom would meet every need. This is the true victory of the morning. Peace, secured in the soul, readiness cultivated in spirit, and focus trained on what truly matters. Gratitude becomes the compass that orients the day, ensuring that even when challenges arise, the heart remains steady, decisions remain guided, and purpose remains clear. Moreover, starting the day with thanksgiving equips us to face difficulties without being overwhelmed. Life will always present obstacles, moments of disappointment, and circumstances beyond control. But gratitude shifts the lens through which we view these moments. It reminds the soul that God's presence outweighs any problem and that peace is not granted by absence of trouble but by the assurance of divine faithfulness. In this way, thanksgiving acts as both shield and anchor. It softens the heart to endure trials, strengthens the mind to make wise choices, and readies the spirit to receive blessings without arrogance or entitlement. Beginning each morning with gratitude is also an act of intent. It says to God, "I trust you. I place my day in your hands. I will see your hand in both the seen and unseen." This posture cultivates humility and reliance, fortifying the soul against fear, comparison, and anxiety. It invites divine multiplication into every area of life: relationships, work, health, creativity, and purpose. Each step taken, each decision made, becomes infused with the rhythm of heaven. By starting with thanks, we create fertile ground for God's blessings, not because we control the outcome, but because we align with the source of abundance. So today, as the morning stretches its light across the world, rise with thanksgiving. Lift your eyes and your heart, acknowledging life, breath, purpose, and presence. Let gratitude set the compass of your soul. Let it guide your actions, shape your choices, and steady your spirit. In this practice, victory is not measured solely by accomplishments but by peace, the peace that comes from knowing you are held, guided, and equipped. Begin each day with gratitude and watch as every ordinary moment becomes sacred. Every challenge becomes a lesson, and every blessing multiplies beyond expectation. Peace is the truest measure of success, and gratitude is the key that unlocks it. With this, all 5 parts of your devotional are now fully expanded into a cohesive series, each around 600 words, keeping your style, rhythm, and spiritual depth consistent.